Now let's take a look on how to navigate in your scene. For this, we're going to create a simple geometry. So let's go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and let's create a cone this time. Now, I want you to hit Alt or the Option key in your keyboard, and then left mouse click, and start dragging your mouse. So this is the way that you can orbit in your scene. Now, if you hit Alt or the Option key in Macintosh and then right-click and drag your mouse, this is how you zoom in and out of your scene. And now the last function is if you hit Alt or the Option key on a Macintosh and then the middle key in your mouse, this allows you to pan. So again, Alt, left-click, orbit, Alt, right-click, zoom in and out, and Alt, middle-click allows you to pan. Now that we know the main controls in order to navigate around our scene and our objects, let's take a look at some hotkeys or shortcuts. The first one is the spacebar. So if you hit the spacebar, you can see that we'll switch from one viewport to 4 viewports. And now if I hover my mouse over different viewports, I can access my geometry from different side views. Now if I hover my mouse over one of the viewports and press the spacebar again, it'll bring me back to my main view. So practice this a little bit. If you hit spacebar and you hover your mouse over another viewport and then hit spacebar again, now we're in the front view. If we hit spacebar again and want to go to the top view, I can just hover my mouse over the top view and hit spacebar again. Now you can see here that the submenu is in all of the different viewports. So this means that we can edit the way a viewport looks and it can be different on the top view than on the perspective view, for example. So right now we are seeing that the top view of my cone is on wireframe mode. That is because this button is clicked here, whereas on my perspective mode we have this button activated. So if I go here and click on this one, I'm now in shaded mode. These other buttons have to do with your textures and materials, so right now you won't really tell the difference if you click on them, but once we start working on a more complex scene with materials and lighting, you'll see that there are also other shading modes. So let's go back to the perspective view and hit spacebar and see it in the full view mode so that we can look at these menus. This is the view menu, and this menu has options such as selecting the camera that you're looking through. You'll see that my attribute editor opens all of the different controls that we can edit from the camera that we're using to look through our cone. Or we can lock the camera. This means that we won't be able to zoom in and out or move along. We'll kind of freeze this view. If we hit lock camera again, it'll unlock it. We can also undo view changes. So for example, if I start moving my scene around and I want to go back to the last view, I can undo my view change. And I can do this multiple times to kind of go back to a certain view that I wanted to have. We can frame all, for example, if I zoom in and hit frame selection, it'll frame everything that I'm selecting. A hotkey for this is pressing F. So if you zoom in and then you press F, it'll go back and frame your selection. You can also bookmark certain views here and access different settings in your camera. Now, the shading menu is similar to the buttons we were looking at here. We'll be able to see more options for lighting once we start working with materials, so I won't really get into this right now. Let's go to the panels menu. This is another way to switch from views. So perspective is where we're at, and the more cameras we add, the more options we'll have from switching from different camera views here. Right now we only have one perspective camera. We can go and switch back to the different orthographic views here. So now we're at the front. The side won't really look too different because of the geometry, you know, the cone's shape. But if we go to the top view, we'll be able to go back into that top view. So let's go back to perspective. Some other hotkeys for your shading modes are 4, 5, 6, which doesn't really look different right now, and 7. These hotkeys, you can see right here the explanation for what they are. So 4 is wireframe display, shaded display is 5, 6 is shaded display with texture maps, which since our geometry doesn't have any texture maps right now, you can't tell the difference. And then 7 is use all lights option. So if we had lights in our scene and materials and textures, you would be able to see all of that here. So let's go back to 4, to the wireframe display, or let's go back to 5 actually, to the shaded display mode. So let's try another hotkey. We had seen that if we hit the spacebar, we can divide one viewport into multiple viewports. Let's hit spacebar again on perspective. And now let's try hitting the spacebar but without letting it go. So if we hold on to the spacebar, we see a menu that's called the marker menu. It customizes based on what you select and gives you different options for that object you're selecting. So now that we're selecting the cone, these are the different options here. And these options kind of repeat up here in your different menus. This is just a different way to access same functionalities. If we leave the spacebar on and then we click on different menus without letting the mouse button go, we can access all of these different functions. If I let go of my mouse and I click again and hold on a different menu, I'll be able to access this. So if you've never used an interface with this kind of function, it can be difficult in the beginning to get used to the mouse and clicking movements, but once you advance, like this can be a really quick way to access different functionalities depending on the object you're looking at. If I let go of the spacebar button, the menu will go away.